All right, let's get into it. For most of its life, Volkswagen was this incredible symbol of German engineering. Reliability, trust, all of that. But back in 2015, that entire reputation was just shattered. And the scandal behind it was absolutely massive. So today, we're going to break down the anatomy of that crisis. Let's just start with this one giant number, 11 million. That's how many cars Volkswagen knowingly sold all over the world with software that was specifically designed for one thing: to cheat. And look, this wasn't some bug or a simple mistake. No, this was a deliberate, calculated deception on a global scale. So the whole thing explodes in September of 2015. It sent this huge shockwave through the entire car industry. The scandal quickly got a nickname, Dieselgate, and what it uncovered was just a stunning betrayal by one of the biggest, most powerful car makers on the planet.
And this right here, this is the exact moment the dam broke. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, they went public. And they didn't just say, hey, we found a problem. They issued a formal notice of violation, basically accusing Volkswagen on the record of programming their diesel cars to cheat on clean air laws.
While the fallout at the very top was immediate. Just 5 days after the EPA's announcement, the CEO, Martin Winterkorn, was out. He resigned. And his statement really says it all. It was a pretty blunt admission. This wasn't just about pollution levels. It was about a fundamental breach of trust with millions and millions of people. So the big question is, how did they actually do it? How did they pull this off? The answer is hiding in this really clever and totally illegal piece of software. It became known as a defeat device. Let's break down exactly how this thing worked. Okay, so to get the cheat, you first have to get the challenge they were facing. See, diesel engines are great at being powerful and fuel efficient. But they have a dirty secret. They produce a ton of nasty pollutants, especially something called nitrogen oxides, or NOx. So the big engineering puzzle was, how do you get rid of that pollution without killing the performance? And this was Volkswagen's solution. The car's software was smart enough to know when it was being tested in a lab. The steering wheel wasn't moving, only 2 wheels were spinning on a dynamometer. It knew. And in that specific test mode, it would turn on all the emissions controls. But the second you drove it onto a real road, the software just switched them off. The result was insane. Out in the real world, some of these cars were pumping out up to 35 times the legal limit of pollutants. Now, the company's first line of defense, which you can see in this quote, was, well, it was something. The head of VW in America actually went before the U.S. Congress and tried to blame the whole thing on a couple of software engineers. He basically suggested this wasn't some huge corporate decision, but just a few rogue employees. As you can imagine, that explanation did not go over well. It was pretty much seen as a weak attempt to downplay a massive systemic fraud. Yeah, that rogue engineer story didn't fly. The deception was just too big, and the fallout was absolutely global. It started a huge reckoning that hit the company from literally every direction you can imagine. The very first hit came from the financial markets, and the reaction was just brutal. In only a few days after the news broke, Volkswagen's stock price completely collapsed. It wiped out more than a third of the company's entire value. We're talking billions of euros, just gone, almost overnight. And believe it or not, that stock plunge was just the beginning. The total estimated cost of this whole scandal is a mind-boggling 31.3 billion euros. That number wraps in everything. All the government fines, the legal settlements with angry customers, and the incredible cost of having to buy back or fix hundreds of thousands of cars. So the key thing to realize here is that the damage was coming from all sides. It wasn't just one big fine. It was a worldwide recall of all 11 million cars. Criminal charges being filed against actual executives, a flood of lawsuits from customers, and of course, a complete and utter shattering of that clean diesel image that VW had spent years and billions of dollars trying to build. Now, to really understand how something like Dieselgate could even happen, it helps to zoom out a little. You start to see that it wasn't just this random, isolated incident. It was maybe the most explosive chapter in a much longer history of corporate controversies for the company. So when you look back, Dieselgate doesn't just come out of nowhere. You can see this pattern of challenges emerge. There were accusations of industrial espionage way back in the 90s, there were huge antitrust fines in the 2010s, and more recently there's been intense scrutiny over their operations in Xinjiang, China. Now, each of these is its own story, for sure, but taken together, they start to paint a picture of a corporate culture that, at times, was willing to bend the rules to get what it wanted. And that's some pretty crucial context for understanding a deception on the scale of Dieselgate. Look, a crisis this big, it forces you to change. It has to. With its reputation in tatters and its whole diesel strategy completely torched, Volkswagen really had no choice but to reinvent itself. And that led to this incredibly dramatic pivot toward a totally new future. So rising from the ashes of Dieselgate came this thing called the New Auto Strategy, and it was a complete 180-degree turn. The company that had bet absolutely everything on clean diesel was now betting its entire future on the exact opposite, electric cars. This wasn't just some new marketing campaign. It was a fundamental shift for the whole company from the ground up. And this image, this contrast really says it all. On one side, you've got a classic icon, the combustion engine Golf, and on the other, you have the all-electric ID.3, which is the symbol of VW's brand new identity. It's the whole story in one picture. A company forced by its own scandal to slam the brakes on its past and race into a completely different future. Which really brings us to the big question at the end of all this. I mean, Volkswagen's pivot to electric cars is real, it's huge, and it has absolutely reshaped the industry. But was this a genuine change of heart, a cultural shift driven by real remorse? Or was this massive, devastating scandal just the brutal, painful price the company had to pay to force itself to finally reinvent? That's the real legacy of Dieselgate that we're all still grappling with today.